Audiobook Academy Biography presents Ronald Reagan. President Ronald Reagan pushed the Soviet Union to conclude the Cold War by helping to redefine the role of government. In the decades after his administration, he strengthened the conservative agenda. Ronald Reagan, who was he? In his early years, Ronald Reagan appeared in more than 50 films. He met his future wife, Nancy Davis Reagan, while working as the president of the Screen Actors Guild in Hollywood during that time period as well. He went on to serve as governor of California for 2 terms after that. With 2 terms as president, Reagan became a conservative icon throughout the following decades, even though he was an early supporter of the Democratic Party. With Alzheimer's disease, Reagan died on June 5, 2004. Early age. John Edward Jack Reagan and Nellie Wilson Reagan welcomed their first child, Ronald Wilson Reagan, into the world on February 6, 1911, in Tampico, Illinois. It was because he looked like a chubby little Dutchman that his father gave him the moniker Dutch. While growing up, Reagan and his family moved around a number of small communities before landing in Dixon, Illinois, in 1920. During his time at Dixon High School, Reagan was an athlete, student body president, and actor in the school plays. He graduated in 1928. He worked as a lifeguard in Dixon, Illinois, throughout his summer vacations. Reagan studied economics and sociology at Eureka College in Illinois, where he received a sports scholarship. He was a member of the football, track, and swimming teams, as well as a student council president and an actor in the school's plays while at the university. Following graduation in 1932, he worked as a sports broadcaster on the radio in the state of Iowa. Careers in Hollywood and marriages in the industry. Reagan agreed to a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers Pictures in 1937. He appeared in more than 50 films during the next 3 decades. Canuta Rockne, All-American is one of his best-known roles, playing Notre Dame football player George Gipp. The character of an accident victim who discovers his legs have been amputated when he wakes up in the 1942 film King's Row was another important one for Reagan. Reagan married actress Jane Wyman in 1940, and the couple had a daughter named Maureen, as well as a son named Michael, through adoption. In 1948, the couple decided to call it quits. Reagan served in the Army but was unable to fight owing to his bad vision, so he made training films instead. Captain was his military rank when he was discharged. Reagan served as president of the Screen Actors Guild from 1947 until 1952. During this period, he met actress Nancy Davis, who had sought his assistance after she was wrongly put on the Hollywood blacklist as a suspected communist sympathizer. Reagan was wary about getting married again after his terrible divorce from Wyman, but the two fell in love almost away. When he realized Nancy was a match for him, he married her in 1952. Patsy and Ronald were the couple's only children. In 1954, Reagan was hired as the host of the weekly television drama series The General Electric Theater as his film career began to wane. As a host, he was also tasked with representing GE on a promotional tour of the United States. During this time, he went from a liberal to a conservative political ideology, leading pro-business discussions and speaking out against excessive government regulation and wasteful spending, which would become important issues in his political career. Governor's office and a presidency. After delivering a well-received television address in support of conservative presidential candidate Barry Goldwater in 1964, Reagan entered the national political limelight. 2 years later, he won the governorship of California by almost 1 million votes over Democratic incumbent Edmund Pat Brown Sr. in his first election as a public official. His re-election in 1970 signified the beginning of a second term. Reagan ultimately won the Republican presidential nomination in 1980 after 2 failed runs in 1968 and 1976. After defeating Democrat incumbent President Jimmy Carter in the general election, he won the Electoral College, 489-49, and approximately 51% of the popular vote that year. Reagan was the oldest person ever elected to the office of President of the United States when he was elected in 1980. Assassination attempt at the 1981 inauguration. As part of his inauguration address delivered on January 20, 1981, Reagan stated that government is not the solution to our problems, it is the problem. It was his dream that the United States would once again be a beacon of hope for those who do not have freedom, that the country would undergo a period of national rejuvenation. Along with the introduction of designer clothing and the White House's contentious redecoration, Ronald and Nancy Reagan ushered in a new age of White House splendor. Quick-thinking Secret Service officials rushed President Reagan into his limousine as bullets broke out outside the Washington Hilton Hotel on March 30, 1981. When they arrived at the scene, they discovered that he had been injured. John Hinckley Jr., the man who tried to assassinate President Obama, also shot 3 other individuals, none of whom died. One of the president's lungs had been punctured, but the bullet narrowly missed his heart, according to doctors at the hospital. "Honey, I forgot to duck," Reagan later said to his wife, who was known for her jovial demeanor. Reagan returned to work within a few weeks following the shooting. The domestic priorities. Reagan implemented a number of conservative domestic measures throughout his presidency. The United States economy was boosted by tax cuts. In addition, he argued for higher military spending, cuts to social programs, and a loosening of regulations on the private sector. According to many experts, the country's economy began to revive in 1983 and entered a 7-year phase of prosperity. Critics, on the other hand, argued that his policies had raised the deficit and harmed the middle class and poor people. In 1981, Ronald Reagan made history again by selecting Sandra Day O'Connor to the Supreme Court as the first female justice. International relations. The end of the Cold War was Reagan's top foreign policy priority during his first term in office. Using the term evil empire to describe the Soviet Union, Reagan began a huge buildup of American military power and weapons stockpiles. This helped to support anti-communist groups in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. To counter Soviet nuclear missile threats, he unveiled the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, in 1983. This initiative aimed to build space-based weapons to defend the United States. As part of an international peacekeeping mission, Reagan sent 800 U.S. Marines to Lebanon in June of 1982. In October of the following year, 241 Americans were killed in a suicide bombing at a Marine barracks in Beirut. After Marxist rebels ousted the government in Grenada, Reagan authorized U.S. forces to invade the Caribbean island. The Reagan administration also had to deal with a tense relationship with Libyan leader Muammar al-Gaddafi, on top of the issues in Lebanon and Grenada. Gorbachev and the 1984 election. Re-election to a second term came in November 1984, when Reagan defeated Democratic opponent Walter Mondale in a landslide. The biggest number of electoral votes ever won by an American presidential candidate was obtained by Ronald Reagan in the election. The Iran-Contra Scandal, which involved arms for hostages arrangement with Iran in order to send money to anti-communist insurgencies in Central America, marred his second administration. Reagan later admitted that it was a mistake made partly at the First Lady's request, although originally denying knowing about it. As chairman of the Soviet Union during Reagan's second term, Mikhail Gorbachev sought to reform the Soviet Union. Historic agreements were struck by both countries in 1987 to remove intermediate-range nuclear missiles. Reagan famously asked Gorbachev to dismantle the Berlin Wall, a symbol of communism, in the same year. Over the course of the next 2 years, Gorbachev granted the people of Berlin permission to tear down the wall, bringing an end to Soviet rule over East Germany. A few weeks before German reunification was complete, Ronald Reagan came to Berlin in September 1990 and took a few symbolic punches at the remaining section of the wall. Death in the later years. Following their departure from the White House in January of that year, Reagan and Nancy returned to their Los Angeles, California, residence. The Ronald W. Reagan Presidential Library and Center for Public Affairs was inaugurated in Simi Valley, California, on September 25, 1991. A diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease was made public by Ronald Reagan to the American people in November 1994 in a letter written by hand. At the time of his death in Los Angeles on June 5, 2004, he was the nation's longest-serving president at the age of 93. Reagan was laid to rest at his presidential library in California after a state burial in Washington, D.C. Her death in 2016 at the age of 94 from heart failure was also interred at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library and Center for Public Affairs, which is named after him. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.